this is a page that I did to do with that section, and then I get into it for sure. But so many things. I've got 6 businesses, okay? So the 6 plus the 7, which is me. So then you've got, there's my Pleiades thing right there, and my Venus being just past that in Rohini, right? But what did I say? My 5th and my 6th. So my 6th is heavily in there. So my work is heavily in that. Yes. And it's what I have. And I got into the tree work. And I did have a tree that I grew up with and that my son partially grew up with. It's the black willow, which connects me, of course, to Black Widow, which takes us back into spider energy, because Kali is my primary person. But the missionaries in my life, in my family, that brought Nigeria to me, and therefore the Orisha and Mamiwata and the African prophetesses that are the Sibyls, the Delphi oracles, like all of that truth came at me as a child. The Abeji twins, who are the Orisha. Orisha are not gods and goddesses. They are gods. One God, they are his helpers. Okay? They came and they built the earth as per his instructions, right? Now, whether or not that's who's coming through to me. Whether they're ancestors in truth, you know, like I don't know how layered the corruptions are necessarily in those spiritual experiences. So, but I accept them as very hopeful, true influences. They've been with me for years and years and years and years and years. And it's been but it took years and years and years to figure out who they are. Yes, even Kurt Cobain came through with a message for me. Yes, I do believe that. So my background with, personally, I've grown up with the Jerusalem Bible. It was given to me by my grandmother's best friend, and that's the translation I prefer. Now, of course, we have to take the Bible apart in terms of the first. If you go to the Bible Came from Arabia, that handles the first 7 books or so that are actually based in regions from there. It's a very small religion. It's a very local tribal religion to a part of the Assyria region in Arabia. Okay, then there's the Babylonian exile. Then they come back and they relocate up into Palestine. Okay, and that's where, if you get into the Bible Unearthed, then you find out that's why. So that's why there was no Solomon's temple, because Solomon was at best a chieftain. Okay, same with David, but Moses. That story, Egypt is mistranslated. There wasn't anything at the time of what we equate with an Egyptian situation. No. Egypt is mistranslated from another part of the Assyria region. So we're not even talking about later on. You know, it's just, so then we get into the prophecies of the Bible, and they're taken from the African prophetesses, the Delphi oracles, okay? So it's a hodgepodge, and we've solved all of that. Right, I've got a Bible from Arabia. These are books I own, okay? Again, started my journey in the library. This is my library back in the day when my kid was young, and then it got remodeled. And I need photos. I have them, but I need to include them in my book. But, you know, you can only get so much. I've done enough to the point where I can release. There's still more to do. I haven't finished this whole section. This goes back to high school when I was in high school when Sinead ripped the demon's face. Yes. And I did this project with my friend for French class. So this is grade 11 was when I woke up to my Irish heritage. Amazingly, I went all those years only knowing I was Scottish and English. And I didn't know that my Scottish come from the O'Neills. I'm a McLaughlin, and the McLaughlins are descendants of Lachlan O'Neill, and O'Neill has a huge power family over in Ireland, connected to Tara. So then I find out why I named my cat Tara. But what I had to do, I've left some pages blank because they're going to have things on them, yes? Right, so I have to step. I go from being a reactor to an actor. Still a reactor. By June, when did Shanetta do this reading? Oh good, I left that part out of this. I've got to edit it in elsewhere. Oh no, who are your spirit guides? 1.9 million views, and sorry, I'm not in shot. Shanetta's, I've been on quite a journey by the time we hit June 11th, 2020. But that's when this popped up. And so I was like, okay, let's see what's what. And like 6 for 6 points she hit with, and she had direct communication from Kali, but 6 for 6 identifying points that are very unique. I was like, okay, wow, Kali, I had no idea. And that's when I ordered this pendant. But so I get into all of that. It's going to be a bit much to relay all that right now, but of course we go back to when I was 2, when I painted the pink spider that I had been incorporating into my drawing instruction stuff, and of Kali and spiders. But then we have Spider Woman as well, grandmother spider, and so these different, now are they manifestations of the same person? But I also went and I went back and watched, it's a pick a card, so I watched the other 3 piles. And the other 3 piles, this is what you want to do. You always want to watch all piles and get information for each guide that you have, yes? And start paying attention that way. It's not like there's only one pile that's yours, but you probably already know that. Books, she speaks to me through books, so, but there, D.H. Lawrence came through as the guide, God, and whoever, I'm not sure if it's Malcolm X, it might be, but it's also an ancestor of mine. I do have ancestors tied to the Great White Brotherhood. My great-grandfather rode the White Stallion in the Orange Day parades in Belfast, so it could be him that's helping, wanting to correct what was done wrong by him. But it could be Francis Bacon as well. But I kind of feel like it's hard to say who on that team turned to be helpful once they, reach the realization. So all I can say quickly is that, also going back to, Amabella made this video for me back in July 2020. Is that when she made it? Yeah, July 18th. Is when it's just not long after I came across her path, and with no accident. So she made this video for me. It's still up there. Okay. And so she knew, and at one point in a live, she was like, Kristen, it's possible, she did a reading for me live. I just ended up being too disruptive. And I didn't want to be. I kept trying not to be disruptive, but it was getting too entertaining in the live chat. And I also suffered a serious injury when I tried to help her, when I was going to start helping her with ads. They made me fall on my knee. They smashed me up and they smashed my phone. And I know that our bosses don't, she's a Freemason. So I know that, the thing is that she's so magical. She's so fucking magical. So there's so many messages that come through and I pick them up anyway, but I was a paid subscriber and then I had to part ways, and she knows it, and we've done all these little moments. Okay, so I keep tabs, but it's dangerous as well. I would tell her everything I know. Maybe at some point I will, but it puts her at risk and I don't want her to suffer ahead of time. I've got a Malcolm X experience here with a chair that my dad was working on, right? I photographed that. I found a photo of this chair that's exactly the same chair. Day after I photographed this, they killed Malika, his daughter. Her age is the reversal of the year that he was born, and it was 4 days after, like I've said in the previous video. So tie the roots in. Amabella recommended this reader. I go and I watch, and boom, there's messages coming through, right? So there's a way to read between the lines in messages, okay? This is Oya, an Orisha that I resonate strongly with. She's the Orisha of storms, and I've got a strong history with twisters and things like that, and I just love, see how the colors work with the colors. Aaliyah came through in this message. Aaliyah's come to me before, and she's affirming the 7 of gods and nations, because of course Aaliyah was sacrificed, and Jay-Z has everything to do with that. And Jay-Z is wearing this, he's with gods and nations, which is got totally Masonic origins. I've got all the work on that. Somebody did a really excellent article on that, but again ties in with, again, Mami Wata, the African prophetesses, all the work that I was led to through that. Nathan Howard, Natural Tahuti, and the work that he did to tie it all together. He was supporting Mama Zogbe, who does all the Mami Wata research. Okay. Which takes me back to a painting, the message that I got in grade 11 while sitting in church. Of course, Buffy St. Marie ties into this, because Kali and the buffalo, again, we go back to, and then Yama rides the buffalo in Bharani, the Nakshatra, where I'm born. Buffalo resurfaced right near me this past month. But yeah, no, I did a paint. I ended up in a psychiatrist's office for 2 years. That's where my dad put me after I had reported this message from God, which just got affirmed. See, they took me back down all of this. I was watching this video. I ended up down a rabbit hole. This is one of my dad's friends. He's the retired head of surgery at Health Sciences Center in Winnipeg, Bob Blanchard, and I grew up in his home. He's another missionary. He and his wife Madeline, they brought Pakistan and India to me. Same as my cousins brought Nigeria to me. They brought Pakistan and India to me. And he had heard, I just found out just a couple of weeks ago because of this video, because the church was doing everything on YouTube, right? The story of how I ended up watching this is a whole other bag, but this is the church I finally left. And he tells the story of how he was walking across the bridge, which is just blocks away from me, back in the day, and he had a voice in his head, and it wasn't a voice that you can hear, but you just know it, and it was telling him to go be a missionary to Muslims. And I was like, okay, well, he just accepts it. So it's exactly the experience that I had in the church that he and I are at together. Okay, that leads me into the psychiatrist's office, but I chose to figure out how real the experience was and who it was coming from, and he chose to become the missionary and go to Pakistan, but he brought Pakistan to me. But he's validating the very experience that I had, because he had exactly the same experience. His response is different, but it's exactly the same experience. And like, hey, Dad. So he and my dad and another friend, they co-host a men's, they hate to call it a Bible study group, but that's in essence what it is, a men's group, they like to say. And they've been at that for years now. And they're very close. Bob loved my mom. My mom was a singer, and he loved her voice. He loves to sing as well. So, but he's tied to Sudan Interior Mission through his mission work. And another one that I know because it's also tied to Sudan Interior Mission. And my cousins that brought Nigeria to me were over there because of Sudan, with Sudan Interior Mission. Okay, so closing, we're just tying up all kinds of shit, because now I know Bob won't want to come around to my way of thinking on all of this. Okay, he needed Pakistan. He ended up in Pakistan. He needed Pakistan. He needed to figure out exactly why God was calling him over there. Yes, as much as to become a missionary, which is, the problem for me. Pakistan rubbed off on him. I know we can't get into that, but I told my dad, I was like, can you let Bob know that I watched his video and it gave me a huge missing piece of my story, right? And thank him for me. And that's probably as far as that will go. But if he wants to talk, of course we'll talk, right? More stories, that the details of which, like, I looked after his grandchildren. I looked after his grandchildren for years. His son was in charge of taking, his son got Bill Gates money and built the first AIDS clinic in India, and I'm sorry. And I looked after his girls. I helped his wife out with the girls while he was too busy to, be there for them. This is the painting I did. This is the priest that I I asked my dad, this was the priest of the church at the time when I got the message, and he avoided, he said, we should talk soon, babe, and then we never talked about it. And if he had talked to me about it, what would my journey have turned into from then? The last church I was in, D.H. Lawrence, and probably Osamari, one of the Orisha of rainbows, left me this huge message. It lasted for a few minutes. I've got videotape of the whole thing. This rainbow that was arcing over from the last church I was in to the library that I love. But of course, D.H. Lawrence, who wrote the Rainbow novel, he's been probably the guide that has been, I have the evidence for going way back to when I was 2. Now, I'm sure everybody's been with me all along, but particularly he likes to come through on certain issues, right? So we finish with this rainbow. Well, we don't even finish there. Okay, but I went back, I did all of my church history. The church that I started off in, the Nazarene church, my grandma was with the Salvation Army. She was the pianist for them for like 50 years. Okay, all heavily Freemasonic, but everything is, okay? But this is how I start to do the groundwork of like, okay, releasing. Basically what you're doing is you're exorcising some kind of demons, right? These are not demonic people. These are people that took good care of me, but they're tied to it, right? It was also tied to it. It had a college. And one of the students would look after me, right? And the administration, Donna, she would babysit me as well. I would do sleepovers with her, right? All good, all good. And they have a campground as well that they shouldn't have any property on First Nations land. But but that's where I experienced close ties to nature, was in that camp. Okay, so grandmother spider with me strongly there. The church that I was at, where this woman who just passed, they killed her off in May with cancer, Lorna, her 2 sons. Yeah, we ended up at St. Aidan's, where all of this happens, right? Even when I'm looking that up, I'm watching the video for it. This is the window I stared at the day that I was like, you can't seriously be targeting me this way. I did a lot of major work there. I was looking after the nursery. I did a huge passion play there. And it was within a month or 2 after that. It was within weeks, days of that passion play that I knew I was out of there. And I was just looking up at this window going, you wouldn't do this to me. And it's like, no, it wasn't him pushing me out. Well, it was him pushing me out, but it wasn't him isolating me, right? And even Ali shows up at the end of the video saying Scorpio, the one that got away, right? Minnow Pond did a reading where this woman has a similar experience where she's got to leave with her son, you know, just to give her son a better view on everything. I'm like, yep, here's what I did. Okay, so, but where do we end up? So I looked at what happened on the day that that Lorna died, and all of these things were coming together for me. So definitely cause and effect. It was the anniversary of Isaac Cappy's disappearance, death. That I have all the evidence. Well, I have enough evidence on it, and I've been going up against people involved directly with his demise. Again, that brings me into Sloan. That brings me to Sloan, Bella, where everything shifted in December of 2019. Because one of the guys that is connected to the Isaac Cappy case, she was tied up in that fight on Twitter, but he made a reference to her, and I went looking her up because of him. And then of course I got heavily, well, I was put on the scene for when her son was killed, so that I would have evidence from right around the time of who was involved probably in that. So again, it's as over, you know, as much as I'm overwhelming you with details, that's how overwhelming it is. But yeah, what was I? Yeah, so we ended up at the church. We ended up, I was taken from Lorna. We ended up at St. Aidan's, where, because Mom was friends, where do I have it? I guess I have it back on this page, okay? Lawrence Ritchie was in charge of the music there at the time, the organist, and he ends up at St. John's Cathedral. He rewrote the music for the whole church service. His son Jordan, I hung out with his kids a lot. He had several kids. Sleepovers with his sister, but Jordan was my age. His sister was younger, Olivia. Jordan and I were in the same art class, okay? So we were at church together and at school together, and in art class together at the same table together. So Jordan's watching while I'm working on this painting, which is the way that I communicated the message. When the priest wouldn't talk to me, I took it to art class, and Mrs. Emsley, bless her, she just supported me in, it's not a good painting. It's not a painting. It's just a message, right? But it's all I could get out. And Jordan's watching me apply the green paint to the white gesso, the primer that hasn't dried yet, and 3 skulls appear, and he's like, I'll pay you $3. It's all I have on me, but I'll give it to you if you don't do anything more with the painting, right? Because just keep the 3 skulls there. It's awesome. And I was like, no, they'll become part of the painting, that we'll know that they're there, but I'm going to keep going with it because it's part of the painting. And so when I find my Kali pendant with the 3 skulls, again, another affirmation. But I know all this in my head, but until they make me go through the work, and here's another story attached to that church. How I left that church was with Sarah. I took her side in a fight against a lady Bible study group that was targeting her because I didn't agree with her, and she had to stand her ground with them by herself, and I supported her by being there in the background looking after her kids while she took them to task. And then I left the church. As soon as my work was done in the church, she left, of course, ahead of that, and I left and followed her over to this church for a while. The priest at this church was friends with me from childhood. His kids were about the same age as me, and we went to vacation Bible school together, and he would drive us to and from. And he was an engineer at the time, and then became a priest. And so it was like, this is just a few blocks away from where I live now. Right? Okay, so if you can follow any of that, but the point being is that there's been such a heavy, strong trajectory for me tied to, and Sinead is in this painting. I've got her quoted all through it because In the Name of the Father came out at the time, but also Universal Mother. Again, and I agreed with her at the time, like I didn't ever question anything that any argument she was making. So you've got this high priestess vibe running through your life that just carries through. I've got some more work to do. I've got to do the work about me and David Schroeder because I got Fiona Barnett there with her and the Catholic Church. I went to... where do I have it? Now that I've lost it. It's just a little too much at times. I put myself in Catholic school for a year in grade 9 after my mama died when I was in grade 7. And then I learned the hard way about Catholic school, why I needed to learn I wanted to have a better education. But, so that's my Catholic experience, even though Anglican is basically just another form of Catholicism. But Sinead's reminding me in her face, she's looking a lot like Fiona Barnett here, who I end up crossing paths with in 2015 because of the Hampstead case, and that ties me into the David Schroeder stuff, because the person that I was helping out with in the Hampstead stuff, who founded Hampstead Research, brought Fiona and David together. Now, if you haven't gone down the Fiona Barnett rabbit hole, and I've got to get David Schroeder's book out. David Schroeder was heavily abused by Michael Aquino, and Fiona Barnett, and this is amongst many. Fiona was raped by Nixon and Billy Graham. She was, one of her main early abusers was Nicole Kidman's dad. And Nicole Kidman has a lot of problems with Fiona Barnett. Nicole was also abused, same as Fiona. That brings me back to the David Lynch rabbit hole with Naomi Watts, who's best friends with Nicole Kidman, right? So very tight timeline. Yeah, so I went to this school in between. By the time I put myself back in public school, which is where I went and painted the message, right? So that's where I am by the time I paint the message. But it was in St. Mary's when I started to draw again. after 13 years of being silent, because this is where I was when Audrey Hepburn died. And that's Audrey Hepburn that got me back into communicating through pictures, because I wanted to draw her because I missed her so much. So I drew her the day after she died. Didn't look anything like her, but it got me on the path, right? Yes, the Hadron Collider. Why? You know what? We'll get into it in the 10th. I absolutely can't speak more. This is... But the affirmation is that I got that email from ArtNet that bison had been brought back to a reserve. And this is from a national publication. It could be anywhere in Canada. I look it up, and it turns out it's like only an hour away from me, outside Portage Prairie. They've been totally abused. They're very poor. They were completely independent, didn't need any help at all. But their business, their agricultural businesses, all their trade was wrecked by the white people of Portage La Prairie back in the 20s. By 1950, they're put on welfare, and they've barely ever recovered from that. But they've set up basically a wellness center where you can, if you have to come to town for medical services, then you can stay with them. And this is just down the block from me, so that's how close to home it is. But they brought buffalo back to the reserve, and the buffalo were rolling around in the dirt and unearthed a carving of a buffalo, giant one of buffalo ribs, bison ribs. And so to me, that tying to Yama and Kali, also I believe either Svati or Vishaka is tied to buffalo. I think it might be Vishaka. So all of that energy is tied to, like, I'm tapping into all of that as I do my work. I do believe in that magic and the ground. So the fact that this happened in the Taurus house, the buffalo house, the ox house, the bull house, yes. So great things are happening. This reader said the person in your dreams is coming. He or she can't be stopped. Okay, this is the reader that what's her Justice Shakur. We'll end with that. Okay. Now, Kali came to me in a lucid dream. That's how she got into my home and scared the shit out of me. Okay, so everybody else can take that as a romance message. And for me, the fact that my painting... Where the hell is it? Okay? I chose not to focus on the message itself. I chose for years to focus on the event of hearing a woman ahead of me, sitting in the pew in front of me that day, started speaking in tongues. So I also need to include all the research I've done into speaking in tongues, which has nothing to do with the Christian tradition until it was brought in as a false tradition in the beginning of the 20th century with the the Presbyterians, no, the Pentecostals, okay? And really what it is, it's a tradition that belongs to absolutely everybody else on earth, speaking in tongues. And so I could say definitely the Orisha were likely to be speaking through that person that day, and or Kali, right? If Kali is connected to the Orisha as well. But so I chose to examine the experience and put the message to the side, the specifics of the message, because I was like, that's almost too big for me to solve, right? I want to focus on what needs to be done, and if I can figure out what the experience is, then it leads me to trust the content. It leads me to trust the content of the message because it gives it context, right? So I went looking for the context, as opposed to Bob, who went and became the missionary right off. You know, like, that was his thing, is not to examine the message for who it's coming from or why, right? So yeah, no, I would say absolutely. And here's just close up of him and what he's saying. And again, retired head of surgery for the huge Health Sciences Center in Winnipeg. Okay. This is with team. And this is the channel, St. Aidan's Winnipeg Online, and it was this episode, Real Lives, April 14th. And SIM is connected to the team. We're talking International Board of Directors for team. Okay, team.org. So again, those Sudan Interior Mission connections, right? Thank you, Allie. Very comfortable. I just started crying as soon as that showed up. I'm like, yep. So, probably leaves you with sort of like, okay, no, but the point being, you can pull it all together. With enough work, you pull it all together and you find out. I can't say that even though I knew all of this in my head, right? It's not until I do this that I actually put it. It's not that you put it to rest, it's that you start to fulfill it, because you can put it in front of other people's eyes, but you do start to see it in a new way, and you feel it in a new way, and you become a new person again. Basically, you're looking at a born again situation, a rebirth situation yet again. Because the emphasis is on a page that I haven't done yet, but it's what I owe to the Orisha, it's what I owe to Africa, it's what I owe to India, to Pakistan, it's what I owe to the rest of the world. But also the babies, the children. There are a couple other pages in here that I need to get into. The Abeji twins feature largely for me. And the Hampstead research work, the blue ball, the blue rose. There are some people in my life that need me to carry on specifically so that they have mentorship. Big things have been put in my care, and immediate things have been put in my care that I have yet to. I know them. I've got the pages set for them, and I've got the photos set for them. I just needed to release this and get this. I've got enough done now that I'm clear on that. So, yeah. So that's it. There's seriously an overlap here with Capricorn energy, but now we put Taurus. We let Taurus rest. Yes. We let Taurus rest because now I did go ahead. I've printed up all the pages. I've totally fallen behind with the journaling, but I've got all the pages for Capricorn ready to go. And I also have the Earth element story printed up, ready to be handled. So now we plow through that at the same time as I start. I'm in production as well for my ad campaigns. Okay, one final thought. Okay, yes, am I slightly sick at this point? Yes, I am, with the exhaustion and the work. But mostly that hit really hard when trying to do these videos. And still sticking with it, even knowing I'm like 2 weeks late with it and everything. But we are on the 15th. This is the 15th, so we're into, oh God, we're into these middle 5 to 6 days of December. Yes, you're starting collaborations, and that's exactly what started for me a couple of days ago. Even a few days ago, I mentioned to my partner Bobby that I needed to be recording video for my ad campaign, and it's going to use voiceover work. And he's like, well, do you want any voiceover work from me? I'm like, sure. So that brings him into my world for the first time willingly. Like, we've had little bumps and stuff there over the last few years. And so definitely we started a collaboration there. So right now I'm writing the script for him, and I'm sending it to him between today and tomorrow, or the next few days. So that's what's happening for me over these middle 5 to 6 days. There might be other collaborations as well, but frankly, if I can get that one completed, then that's a miracle in itself. And then basically we are heading into finishing projects. I was thinking that I'd be launching beforehand, but I don't think that I am. And if we stick to the numerology, yes. So the 10 of completion, right? That's what we're doing in starting a new cycle. We've been in the 2 while and now we've overlapped with the 10. And then we're heading into really fresh energy, I think. So now, as long as they've got my money figured out. I know they've got my money figured out. But it's a do or die time for me. And we've got to check on these planet positions, but I'll do that in the next video. Okay. Oh my God. But that's the Taurus experience. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Much love.